Welcome, everyone. Today, we're going to dive into something called pedigrees. Now, you guys have probably heard the term pedigree before, especially if you own a dog. Pedigree is a dog food brand. Now, what does a pedigree actually show us? There's a couple different things that we're going to be able to look at it. Now, when we get into this, we need to still know words like autosomal, sex-linked, heterozygous, homozygous, and dominant and recessive. So what we're going to do is kind of visualize Punnett squares as we get through this. Now, you might have a pedigree of, say, your family, okay? Here's a pedigree example. Pedigrees that I'm most familiar with are dog pedigrees, okay? What you're looking at here is, say, the parents of your new puppy, you have your grandparents of this dog, and you have your great-grandparents of this dog, and so on and so forth, okay? So it shows the lineage behind these two dogs, okay? It shows the pedigree. Now, how do we read these? This is pretty dang complicated. But we're going to get into something that's going to be a little bit more simple for us. So our pedigree is going to look something like that. It's going to be a series of circles, squares, and filled in circles and filled in squares. So it's a diagram that shows the occurrence of phenotypes within a family. It is only showing the phenotypes, and then we can actually fill in the genotypes because we have enough knowledge to do that, because genotypes lead to particular phenotypes. A couple quick tips that you guys need to know right away. Squares are male. Circles are female. Your filled-in squares are affected males. Your filled-in circles are affected females. And then things that are not filled in mean they are not affected, okay? Meaning that they do not have the trait, or if it's filled in, they do have the trait, okay? So let's dive right in. How do we read one of these things? First and foremost, we need to be able to understand that there's a number of generations. So if we look at this from a horizontal perspective, we have one generation here, another generation here, and then another generation here. So we have a total of 3 generations. Now we can also dictate how many males and how many females. So we have a female and a male. They have 2 kids, which then have children again with these 2. Okay, or let me rephrase this. These 2 have 2 kids. They have a boy and a girl. This boy meets a girl. They have 2 kids. This girl meets a boy. They have 3 kids. Okay, so we can look at it that way. Now we can also look at how many people are affected in this scenario. So we have 1 person affected, 1 male, 2 males, and then we also have a 3rd female that are affected. Now, do we know what it's for at this point? Nope. Okay, but that is something to take into consideration when we actually look at these. Now, there is one thing that's over here that I do want you guys to pay attention to quick. So there's ones that are kind of half filled in, and this means that they're a carrier, which means that they're going to be heterozygous. In some of your examples, they're going to have them half filled in, showing that they're heterozygous. Is that always going to be the case? No. But sometimes they will tell you in your pedigree that it is heterozygous by having a half filled in circle or a half filled in box, depending on how we're looking. Okay. So moving on. Here's an example. It says, in this pedigree, the parents had 4 offspring, 2 male and 2 females. The mother and one of their sons showed the trait, but no one else does. Is there a possibility, could we figure out how to actually show what the genotypes are of these parents? And the answer is yes. Now, what we kind of have to do is we have to determine if something's going to be dominant or something's going to be recessive. If you guys remember, if something's dominant, it's probably going to be pretty apparent. And if something's recessive, it's probably not going to be as apparent. In our image here, we only have 2 people with that recessive trait, so we probably can make the guess that it's going to be recessive, okay? Now, are we going to fill out these genotypes yet? No. Are we going to get to an example? I can guarantee we will. Okay, let's keep moving on. Now, looking at one that's already filled in, we can kind of talk about this. So as it says, the pedigree only shows the phenotype, not the genotype. Perfect. In our case, they already filled the genotype in for us. And not whether a trait is dominant or recessive, but, for example, some members of the family are allergic to strawberries, which is lowercase s, and some are not, which is uppercase s. Here's the same pedigree with the genotypes. See if you can see why some individuals show the trait and some do not. Okay, so we're looking at the same exact we're looking at the same exact pedigrees, this one compared to this one. Now, being allergic to strawberries is a recessive trait. And the reason I can tell you that is we only have 2 individuals, say out of like the 6. But what we also can notice here is that these are 2 lowercase s's, and these are 2 lowercase s's. Everything else has at least 1 dominant trait. This shows us that if you're homozygous recessive, you're going to have that trait, making it a recessive trait. If you have the dominant trait, even if you only have one copy of it, you're not going to be allergic to strawberries, just like these 4 individuals here. Okay, so be able to use Punnett squares to solve these issues. Okay, now there is a little trick in here. So we've went over like normal Punnett squares. We've also went over sex-linked Punnett squares. So our normal Punnett squares are autosomal, and our other ones we went over last week are X-linked. So when most males are affected, the pedigree, it is X-linked, meaning that it can only pertain to the X chromosome. So when you make your Punnett squares, my bad, you have your XX for your female and you have your XY for your male. When approximately 50% of the males and 50% of the females are affected the same, the pedigree is going to be autosomal, meaning that there's not a sex-linked trait, and that's just running our normal Punnett squares we've already done. Okay, so you have to make sure that you identify these 2 things. So we can ask this question: is this pedigree X-linked or is it autosomal? So first thing you should do is just count it up. We have 1, 2, 3 males affected. We have 3 females affected. If we go back to our slide, it says 50% of males and 50% of females are affected. It's going to be autosomal. Perfect. This is an autosomal pedigree. Now, if there's more males, it would probably be sex-linked. Now, pedigrees can also be dominant and or recessive. And this is going to come down to the way you're able to decipher your pedigree. Guys, I'm going to let you know the best way to get better at these is to practice. And the more you practice, the better you're going to be. One of the key tips here is if it shows more effectiveness or shows that there is more people in the Punnett square that are affected by it, or in the pedigree, my apologies, in the pedigree that are affected, it's probably going to be dominant. Now, if there's less people like over here, it's probably going to be recessive. Also, there's a very good key takeaway or key thing you can look for. If a whole generation or even 2 generations skip a particular trait, okay, it probably means it's recessive. So what I mean by this, generation 1, generation 2, and generation 3 all show that dominant trait. But our recessive one, generation 1 shows it, but 2 and 3 don't, but 4 does. So if you're skipping generations, most of the time, guys, this is going to mean that it's going to be recessive. Now, let's fill out one of these together so we can actually talk about it. Let me get that out of the way. So we have a male, a female that are not affected. We have a male that is affected, not affected, not affected, not affected. So it says pedigree 1 shows a family of parrots. One of the offspring shows the trait for blue feathers. R equals red feathers, and lowercase r means blue feathers. So this individual right here is going to be our blue feathered individual. They are the ones that are affected. So we know what this genotype is going to be. We know it's going to be lowercase r, lowercase r. So how the heck do we get the lowercase r through a Punnett square, through the pedigree? Like, how is this possible? So what we need to do is we need to make a Punnett square, okay? So I'm going to pull one of those up, but I need to pause this, and then I'll pull it up for you guys, and we'll get back to it. Perfect. Okay, so here's a Punnett square. We've already talked about this a little bit. We have capital R, we have lowercase r. We know for sure one son has blue feathers, and we have to figure out the parent's genotype. Now, how this is going to be possible is that we need to understand that at least one of these traits is going to give us a lowercase r. Oh, that's not the right letter. I apologize. We need to understand that at least one of these traits is going to give us a lowercase r, a lowercase r. So if we need to get both of these, we have to know that each parent has to contain one of those lowercase letters. So this will give me my mom with the uppercase r, lowercase r, my father with the uppercase r, lowercase r. They're both red, which is awesome. We then can fill in our Punnett square. And what you're going to notice is that this bottom right-hand corner, ding, 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 is our blue son. Okay. Now, does that math work out to what we had? Wow. Okay. We had 4 children with 1 being blue. We had 4 children with 1 being blue. Now, does that always happen? No. But that is what you guys have to do to make sure that you can get the right answer. Work backwards. Think it through. You guys are capable. Okay? Oh, hell. So, it's going to be a recessive trait. The genotypes have to be capital R, lowercase r, so they have to be heterozygous. And what are the 2 genotypes could the other offspring have? We can take that from here. we can either have homozygous dominant or we can have heterozygous. And that will fill in all of our boxes. Okay. Now, we can look at another example. So Pedigree 3 is studying hair color in a family. In humans, dark hair, which is capital B, is dominant to blonde hair, which will be lowercase b. In this case, individuals who are shaded are dark hair, and individuals who have clear circles are blonde. So we have dark hair, dark hair, dark hair, dark hair, two blondes. Okay. How do we do this? So what are the genotypes of the parents? This is very, very similar to the last example. We have to make sure that we are getting at least two blonde children. Okay. So to get blonde, we have to have two lowercase b's. So to do this, once again, we have to have heterozygous parents, because then those two b's would come into play, which will look very, very similar to our last Punnett square. What is the genotype of the sons? Our sons are right here, which will be lowercase b, or homozygous recessive. And what are the two possible genotypes of the daughters? They can either be homozygous dominant or they can be heterozygous. If you want to see how that is broken down, it'll look something like this. So let's back all this out, back. We have capital B. Don't worry about this and don't worry about that. That's from the last problem. We have capital B, lowercase b, capital B, capital B, lowercase b. Bam, 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 bam. And we have our one individual right there that will have our blonde hair, or the possibility of having blonde hair. Remember, this is just like a problem. This is not exact. Okay, so we have the possibility to have blonde hair, but most of the time you are going to see that dark brown hair, and you have two different genotypes, capital B or capital B, lowercase b. Okay, now I did put together a little list to kind of help you guys, hopefully some tricks or tips. I know pedigrees can get kind of confusing. This is what they look like. So first and foremost, you need to determine what the graph is showing. So determine if it's sex-linked dominant, sex-linked recessive, autosomal dominant, or autosomal recessive. Once you know that, you're off to a really good start. So identify what type of Punnett or what type of pedigree it is. So when you make your Punnett squares, you know exactly what you're looking at. Number 2, fill in the genotypes that you for sure know. If you know that it is going to be recessive, fill in the recessive traits. If you know it is dominant, maybe put one of the letters in there. Make sure you know that at least has to have one capital letter. Fill in everything that you know. Fill in half genotypes if you know one of the letters, meaning like if you know it's going to be at least one dominant trait, you might not know if it's heterozygous or homozygous, fill the first letter in. You can go back and fill in the second letter later. Look for genotypes that are already shown to you. So a lot of times, guys, in your examples, they will show you at least one of the genotypes in the Punnett square. And then lastly, work backwards to figure out your genotypes. Okay. I know this won't make exactly a bunch of sense, but work backwards. Start from the bottom and work your way back up. Okay. Do your best to explain it and to decipher it and to break it down. Now, to give you guys some practice, on your Google Classroom link today, there is a worksheet there that has a variety of different pedigrees. And if you scroll down there, there is an answer key for those pedigrees. In class, I'm sure your teacher is probably going to go over a couple more examples with you. That is awesome. If you're watching the video, need help, please reach out, please ask. If you want to work on those practice problems, they are optional. So make sure you guys look at them, take a quick peek at it. If you guys have any questions or concerns, reach out to your teachers. Other than that, my biggest advice I can give you, pedigrees can be frustrating, but just keep working through it. Try to use your knowledge of homozygous, heterozygous, autosomal, sex-linked, all those different terms, and try to break everything down into pedigrees. If you guys get stuck or need help, please reach out to your teachers. Other than that, have a great day. Talk to you guys all soon. Bye.